The unraveling thread. Natasha Coleman had always prided herself on being observant. As a freelance graphic designer, she noticed details others missed: the subtle inconsistencies in color schemes, the way shadows fell incorrectly in photographs, the small imperfections that could ruin an entire project. So when she found herself standing in Marcus's home office at 2 a.m, staring at a stack of documents that made no sense, she knew something was terribly wrong. The papers had spilled from an overturned box when she'd bumped into Marcus's desk while searching for her tablet charger. Bank statements from accounts she'd never heard of. Business correspondence with companies that didn't exist in any internet search. Transfer receipts for amounts that made her head spin, money moving in and out of accounts with the frequency and precision of a Swiss clock. Her hands trembled as she photographed each document with her phone. 12 years of marriage, and she'd never seen any of these papers. Marcus had always handled their finances, claiming his business degree made him better suited for such matters. She'd been grateful, actually, to avoid the tedium of bill paying and investment tracking. Now that gratitude felt like naivety. The next morning brought an encounter that would haunt her for weeks. While grabbing coffee at their usual neighborhood cafe, a woman approached her table. Tall, elegant, with prematurely silver hair and knowing eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of Natasha's appearance. "You must be Natasha," the woman said, sliding uninvited into the opposite chair. "I'm Victoria Sterling. We have so much to discuss." Natasha frowned, searching her memory for any mention of this name. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Victoria's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Not directly, no. But I know quite a lot about you. Your favorite coffee, order medium caramel macchiato, extra shot. Your work schedule, you typically finish client. Calls by 3 on Tuesdays. Even your husband's pet name for you." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Sunshine, isn't it?" The blood drained from Natasha's face. Only Marcus called her that, and only in private moments. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been watching your husband for quite some time." Victoria stood, leaving a business card on the table. "When you're ready to learn the truth about Marcus Coleman, and I do mean when, not if, call me. But don't wait too long. Darling, time isn't on your side." That evening, Marcus returned from his business trip earlier than expected. Finding Natasha in the kitchen, preparing dinner with mechanical precision, he wrapped his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck in. The familiar gesture that once melted her defenses. "Missed you, sunshine," he murmured. The endearment that had always made her smile now felt like ice water in her veins. She turned in his arms, studying his face as if seeing it for the first time. The confident jawline, the warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. The small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident tore, so he'd told her. How many of his stories were lies? "How was the conference?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "Profitable," he replied. But something flickered across his expression, too quick for most people to catch. But Natasha's trained eye caught the micro-expression of discomfort. "Secured. 3 new clients. We should celebrate." Later that night, as Marcus slept beside her, Natasha stared at the ceiling and felt the foundation of her world cracking. The documents, the mysterious woman, the subtle wrongness she'd been ignoring for months said all pointed to a truth she wasn't ready to face. Her perfect marriage was built on lies, and she was about to discover just how deep those lies went. Beneath the surface, the private investigator's office smelled like stale coffee and disappointment. Detective Riley Chen, recently retired from the police force, had agreed to meet with Natasha after a week of sleepless nights and careful deliberation. The business card Victoria Sterling had left felt like it was burning a hole in Natasha's purse. But she needed professional help before making that call. "Tell me what you've observed," Riley said, her weathered hands folded on the desk between them. At 62, she'd seen enough broken marriages to recognize the signs of something deeper than simple infidelity. Natasha spread the photographs of the financial documents across the desk, watching Riley's expression grow increasingly grave. "These accounts have never seen them before. The amounts are staggering. You live comfortably. But this suggests millions of dollars moving through accounts I didn't know existed." Riley examined each image with a magnifying glass, making notes in precise handwriting. This routing number belongs to a bank in the Cayman Islands. This one's from Switzerland. Your husband isn't just hiding money, Mrs. Coleman. He's laundering it. The words hit Natasha like a physical blow. That's impossible. Marcus runs a consulting firm. He helps small businesses with their marketing strategies, does he? Have you ever met any of his clients? Natasha opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. In 12 years, Marcus had never brought clients to company parties, never mentioned specific names or projects in detail. His work conversations were always vague, peppered with generic business terminology that revealed nothing substantial. I need to show you something, Riley said, pulling out a thick folder. I ran a preliminary background check on your husband. After you called, the Marcus Coleman you married doesn't exist before 2010. The room spun slightly as Natasha processed this information. What do you mean? No employment history, no educational records, no credit history before that year? As if he materialized fully formed as a 30-year-old businessman. Professional identity theft often involves creating entirely new personas. Riley's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Speaking of which, your mysterious coffee shop visitor just walked into my building. Here to see you. When Victoria entered the office 5 minutes later, she moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to controlling conversations. She acknowledged Riley with a nod of professional respect before focusing entirely on Natasha. I see you've begun investigating, Victoria said, settling into a chair. Good, that saves us time. How did you know I was here? Natasha demanded. I've been tracking Marcus's activities for 18 months. That includes monitoring anyone who might discover his operation. Victoria's expression softened slightly. You're not the first wife, Natasha. You're the fourth. The words felt surreal. The fourth what? The fourth woman Marcus has married as part of his cover identity. Each marriage lasts approximately 10 years, provides legitimacy for his financial operations, and ends when the wife either discovers the truth or outlives her usefulness. Riley leaned forward. What happened to the other 3? Victoria's silence stretched uncomfortably long. One committed suicide after discovering her children weren't biologically her husband's. Another disappeared entirely officially. She ran away to start a new life, but I have my doubts. The third is currently in witness protection after testifying against a money laundering operation. Natasha felt the room closing in around her. This is insane. You're talking about my husband like he's some kind of criminal mastermind. Marcus Coleman, and that isn't his real name, works for an organization that specializes in long-term financial fraud. Identify targets, establish deep cover identities, and systematically drain assets while building legitimate business. Fronts, your design business, for instance, has been used to launder money for 2 years. That's impossible, Natasha whispered. But even as she spoke, she remembered the unusual clients who paid in cash, the projects that seemed too simple for the fees involved. The business account Marcus had insisted on managing for her, Victoria, placed a USB drive on the desk, bank records, communication intercepts, and photographic evidence. Your husband's real name is Thomas Brennan. He's wanted in connection with fraud schemes in 7 states. Riley picked up the drive, her expression grim. If this is accurate, Mrs. Coleman, you're in serious danger. These operations don't end quietly. Natasha stared at the small device that contained the destruction of everything she'd believed about her life. 12 years of marriage, of shared dreams and intimate moments, reduced to evidence in a criminal investigation. The man who held her during thunderstorms, who remembered her coffee order and anniversary, who called her sunshine, that man was a lie. What do I do now? She asked, her voice barely audible. Victoria's smile held no warmth. Now we prove it, and we make sure you survive the process. The Web Titans, the evidence on Victoria's USB drive, painted a picture so devastating that Natasha spent 3 days in a hotel room, afraid to return home. Bank records showed her design business had processed over $2 million in suspicious transactions. Email chains revealed Marcus coordinating with contacts across multiple countries. Most chilling were the photographs Marcus meeting with known criminals, exchanging briefcases, shaking hands with men whose faces appeared on FBI wanted posters. When she finally returned home, She found Marcus in the kitchen making breakfast, humming softly as he scrambled eggs. The domestic scene felt like a mockery of everything she'd once cherished. "There's my sunshine," he said, turning to kiss her cheek. "Feeling better? You seemed off when you left for your sister's place." She hadn't told him she was going to her sister's. Another lie detected, catalogued, filed away with the growing collection. "Much better," she managed, accepting the plate he offered. The eggs tasted like ashdot that afternoon. While Marcus was supposedly meeting with clients, Natasha received an unexpected visitor. James Morrison stood on her doorstep, tall and impeccably dressed, with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. She recognized him from the photographs, Marcus's frequent lunch companion and alleged business partner. "Mrs. Coleman, such a pleasure to finally meet you properly," he said, stepping into her foyer without invitation. "Marcus speaks of you constantly." Something in his tone made her skin crawl. "I'm sorry, Marcus isn't home right now." "I know exactly where Marcus is." James moved into her living room, examining family photographs with unsettling interest. "I'm actually here to discuss you, my dear, and certain ... concerns that have come to my attention." Natasha's blood chilled. "I don't understand." "Private. Investigators leave digital footprints. Hotel registrations create paper trails. In Victoria Sterlingwell, she's been a thorn in our side for quite some time." James turned to face her fully, and she saw something predatory in his expression. "The question is, what do we do about curious wives who ask too many questions?" The threat was implicit but unmistakable. Natasha forced herself to remain calm, remembering Riley's advice about documenting everything. Her phone was recording audio in her pocket. "I think you have the wrong impression," she said carefully. "I've been dealing with some personal issues, but nothing that concerns Marcus's business." James laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Marcus always chooses intelligent women. It makes the relationships more convincing, but eventually creates complications." He picked up a wedding photo, studying it with clinical detachment. "Did you know your predecessor tried to run? We found her 3 states away, living under a new name, tragic car accident, really. Black ice is so unpredictable." The casual mention of murder made Natasha's knees weak. She gripped the back of a chair for support, fighting waves of nausea. "I can see you're beginning to understand," James continued. "Marcus has grown fond of you more than the others, I suspect. But fondness doesn't override business necessities. What do you want from me? Compliance, silence, and most importantly, your signature on some documents that will transfer certain assets to more ... secure locations." He pulled a manila envelope from his briefcase. "Assurance, you might say, against future complications?" Natasha stared at the envelope, recognizing it as a trap that would make her complicit in whatever crimes they were committing. "And if I refuse, then you'll join the growing list of people who've experienced unfortunate accidents." James set the envelope on her coffee table. "You have 24 hours to consider your options. I'll return tomorrow evening for your answer." After he left, Natasha collapsed onto her couch, shaking uncontrollably. The man she'd loved for 12 years wasn't just a criminal, he was part of an organization that killed people to protect their secrets. Every memory of their life together was contaminated now, every tender moment revealed as manipulation. Phone rang. Riley's number. "They know," Natasha whispered when she answered. "I figured as much. Someone's been watching my office, and Victoria's safe house was compromised this morning. We need to move fast." Riley's voice was tense. "Can you get to the documents in Marcus's office without being detected? He's gone until evening, but do it. Photograph everything you can find, then get out. Don't go home tonight." Anywhere predictable? Natasha spent the next hour methodically documenting Marcus's hidden files, her hands steady despite her terror. She found passports with different names, all bearing Marcus's photo. Ding, financial records, stretching back decades. And most damning, a list of names with dates beside them, the wives Victoria had mentioned, with annotations that made her blood run cold. The last entry was her own name. With tomorrow's date circled in red ink, as she prepared to leave, she heard Marcus's car in the driveway hours earlier than expected. Panic flooded her system as she quickly closed file drawers and deleted the photos from her phone's recently deleted folder. She managed to slip out the back door just as she heard his key in the front lock. Crouched behind their garden shed, listening to Marcus call her name throughout the house, Natasha finally understood the full scope of her situation. She wasn't just married to a criminal, she was married to a man who had already decided to kill her. The only question now was whether she could expose him before he succeeded. Breaking point, the FBI. Field office buzzed with controlled urgency as Agent Thompson reviewed the evidence Natasha had gathered. 3 days had passed since she'd fled her home, moving between safe houses while Riley coordinated with federal authorities. The photographs from Marcus's office had provided the missing pieces of an investigation that had been stalled for months. Your husband Thomas Brennan's part of a sophisticated network we've been tracking across multiple jurisdictions, Agent Thompson explained, spreading surveillance photos across the conference table. What we couldn't prove was the domestic operation. Your evidence changes everything. Natasha stared at the images of Marcus's meeting with known criminals, her stomach churning at how normal he looked in each photograph. Even while orchestrating fraud schemes, he maintained the same easy smile that had charmed her at their first meeting. The operation tomorrow night, we need you to wear a wire, Thompson continued. James Morrison believes he's collecting your signature on transfer documents. Instead, we'll have enough recorded evidence to bring down the entire network. If something goes wrong, Natasha's voice was barely audible. Riley placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll have agents positioned throughout the neighborhood. The moment you're in danger, we move. That evening, Natasha returned to the house she'd once called home, now fitted with a nearly invisible recording device. The familiar rooms felt foreign, contaminated by knowledge of their true purpose. She'd lived here for 8 years, believing she was building a life with someone she loved. Now, every corner held evidence of deception. Marcus was waiting in the living room when she arrived, and the sight of him sent conflicting emotions crashing through her system. Despite everything, part of her still responded to his presence. Years of conditioning couldn't be erased in a week. There's my girl, he said, rising to embrace her. But his smile seemed strained, and his hands lingered on her arms as if checking for something. James said you two had an interesting conversation. He made some very serious accusations. Natasha replied carefully, following the script Riley had helped her rehearse. About your business. About us. I need to know the truth, Marcus. 4. A moment. Something flickered across his face. Genuine emotion. Perhaps even regret. Then the mask slipped back into place. The truth is complicated, sunshine. He guided her to the couch, his movements careful and deliberate. I've been trying to protect you from certain realities of my work. Money laundering isn't work, Marcus. It's crime. His laugh was bitter. You think I had a choice? You think any of us did? He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. I was recruited 15 years ago when I was drowning in debt, facing prison for fraud charges I'd committed out of desperation. They offered me a new life, a clean slate, in exchange for using my skills in their organization. Natasha felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly suppressed. And the other wives? Marcus froze, his back still turned to her. What do you know about other wives? I know I'm the 4th. I know what happened to the others. She kept her voice steady, knowing the wire was capturing every word. What I don't understand is why you married me, if you knew how it would end. When he turned around, there were tears in his eyes, the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him in weeks. Because I fell in love with you. Really, truly fell in love. For the first time in my life. He moved toward her, his hands outstretched. The others were assignments. Natasha. Convenient covers. But you changed everything. The confession hit her like a physical blow. Even now, even after everything, part of her wanted to believe him. And help me, she whispered. Help me understand. Help the FBI bring down the people who control you. Marcus's expression hardened instantly. The FBI. He pulled out his phone, and Natasha realized with growing horror that he was scrolling through surveillance footage from around the house. You mean these FBI agents? Positioned in the Martinez's backyard? Or the ones in the white van down the street? Panic flooded her system as she understood the trap she'd walked into. Marcus had known about the operation from the beginning. "Did you really think we'd survive this long without contacts inside federal law enforcement?" His voice was cold. Now, all pretense of emotion gone, "Agent Thompson has been feeding us information about their investigation for months." The sound of vehicles surrounding the house made Natasha's heart pound. Through the window, she could see black SUVs blocking the street, but she couldn't tell if they belonged to the FBI or Marcus's organization. "I'm sorry, Sunshine," Marcus said, pulling a gun from behind a throw pillow. "I really did love you. But business is business." The front door exploded inward as tactical teams flooded the house, shouting commands. In the chaos that followed, Natasha threw herself behind the couch as gunfire erupted around her. She could hear Riley's voice shouting her name, could see muzzle flashes reflecting off the walls. When the shooting stopped, Marcus lay motionless near the window, blood pooling beneath his still form. Agent Thompson was being led away in handcuffs, his corruption finally exposed. Natasha sat on her living room floor, surrounded by the debris of her shattered life. Finally understanding that survival was just the beginning of a much longer journey, the man she'd loved for 12 years was dead. The life she'd built was a lie. But for the first time in weeks, she could breathe freely, knowing the web that had trapped her was finally broken, rising from ashes 2 years later. Natasha sat in a coffee shop in Portland, Oregon, watching rain streak down the window while she reviewed proofs for her latest client. The graphic design business she'd rebuilt from scratch bore no resemblance to the unwitting money laundering operation she'd once run. Every client was vetted, every transaction transparent, every relationship built on truth rather than deception. Her sister Claire slid into the opposite seat, carrying 2 steaming mugs and wearing the concerned expression that had become familiar since the trial. "You're brooding again," reflecting, Natasha corrected, accepting the coffee gratefully. "There's a difference. The past 24 months had been a masterclass in rebuilding an identity from ruins. The federal investigation had cleared her of criminal wrongdoing, but the media attention had made continuing her old life impossible. Thomas Brennan Shea still struggled to think of him by his real name, had left behind a trail of victims, whose stories dominated headlines for months. Detective Riley Chen, now working as a private consultant, had helped her navigate the legal complexities of reclaiming her financial independence. The house in Chicago had been seized as evidence, along with most of their shared assets. Insurance policies, bank accounts, even her wedding ring, everything connected to Marcus had been contaminated by his crimes. "The support group meeting is tonight," Claire reminded her gently. "Dr. Rodriguez thinks it would be good for you to share your experience with the new members." Natasha nodded, though the thought of reliving her story still felt overwhelming. The survivors group for fraud victims had become her lifeline during the darkest months after the trial. Hearing from others who'd been deceived by people they loved had helped her understand that the shame she carried wasn't hers to bear. "There's something else," Claire continued, pulling out her phone. David called. He wanted to confirm dinner. Tomorrow night. The mention of David's name brought a small smile to Natasha's face. David Martinez was nothing like Marcus Quiet, where Marcus had been charming, steady where Marcus had been unpredictable. A librarian and part-time photographer, he'd entered her life slowly, patiently, understanding that trust would be earned in small increments rather than grand gestures. Their relationship had begun as friendship, built through shared volunteer work at a literacy program. He'd known her story from the beginning the trial had made. Privacy impossible, but treated her without pity or fascination. He saw her as Natasha, not as the woman who'd been married to a criminal. "I still can't believe he's willing to deal with all my baggage," she admitted. "It's not baggage," Claire said firmly. "It's experience. It's wisdom earned through surviving something terrible. The right person doesn't see that as a burden." That evening's support group meeting introduced 3 new members, all women who'd discovered their partners weren't who they claimed to be. Natasha listened to their stories of confusion, betrayal, and self-doubt with painful recognition. The hardest part, she told them when it was her turn to speak, isn't accepting that they lied. It's accepting that some of it was real. The moments of genuine connection, the shared laughter, the comfort they provided, those feelings were real, even if their motivations weren't. One of the new members, a young woman whose husband had been running a Ponzi scheme, raised her hand. How do you trust anyone again?
Oh,
How do you know if someone is telling the truth? Natasha considered the question carefully.
you don't know.
Not completely. But you learn to trust your instincts again. You pay attention to consistency between words and actions. You build relationships slowly, with people who are patient enough to earn your trust properly. After the meeting, she walked through the Portland streets toward her small apartment, reflecting on how much her relationship with herself had changed. The woman who'd been married to Marcus had been compliant, trusting, willing to let someone else handle the difficult aspects of life. This version of herself asked questions, verified information, and maintained financial independence as a form of self-protection. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Hope the meeting went well. Looking forward to tomorrow. No pressure, but I may have found another bookstore cat that needs photographing. The message made her laugh, a genuine, spontaneous sound that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. David's hobby of photographing cats in independent bookstores was absurd and wonderful. Exactly the kind of simple joy she'd learned to appreciate. Standing at her apartment window, looking out at the city lights reflected in puddles on the street, below, Natasha felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not happiness that would come and go, but a deep, abiding sense that she was exactly where she needed to be. The woman who'd been destroyed by Marcus Coleman's betrayal was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, more aware, more authentically herself than she'd ever been. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer frightening. She was no longer afraid of shadows, because she'd learned to create her own light. Tomorrow, she would have dinner with a man who called her by her real name and meant it. She would laugh at his stories about library patrons and listen to his plans for weekend photography adventures. She would continue building a life based on truth rather than illusion. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, that felt like enough.